Good evening, everybody. I declare the Council Members' Briefing Session open at 6 p.m. This meeting today is being held on Whadjuk Noongar Budja, and I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to Elders past, present and future. I thank all past and present members of the community that have supported the city to better understand and value Noongar culture within the city of Wanneroo. Please note that the audio-visual proceedings of tonight's meeting will be live broadcast online with the Councillor Miles, I'm speaking, please don't speak. Please note that the audio-visual proceedings of tonight's meeting will be live broadcast online with the exception of matters discussed behind closed doors. The broadcast of the proceedings of the meeting can be accessed live and on demand through the City of Wanneroo YouTube channel. Item 1, attendances are as per the record. We have no requests for electronic attendance tonight, and I see that we have apologies from Councillor Seif, apologies from Councillor Moore, apologies from Councillor Huntley, apologies from Councillor Parker, a leave of absence from Councillor Berry, an apology from Councillor Bedworth. I have not heard officially from Councillor Nguyen or Councillor Wright is here. I see him there. Okay. Deputations. The rules of deputation. Deputations are to be presented during the briefing session at item 3 of the order of business. Deputations must relate to a report on the current briefing session agenda. A deputation is not to exceed 3 speakers in number, and only those speakers may address the council members. Speakers of a deputation will collectively have a maximum of up to 10 minutes, depending on the number of deputations received, to address the council members, unless an extension of time is granted. A deputation is to be in the form of a statement, and no debate or discussion on the matter is to occur. Questions from council members relating to the subject matter should be reserved until the administration has presented on the relevant report during the meeting. However, a point of clarification by a council member on a specific statement may be permitted. There is an opportunity for public question time for members of the public at item 7 in the order of business. And we actually have 6 deputations this evening. And the first deputation is response to the petition PTO 2724, request for solid fencing of Shaftesbury Avenue Drainage Basin, Alexander Heights. Now, Ms Kylie Owen is no longer available because of family matters and has requested that her deputation be read out, so I will read her deputation out on her behalf. Thank you for taking the time to read our recent petition and now our deputation to request the drainage pit on Shaftesbury Avenue, Hepburn Avenue, Alexander Heights be enclosed with fencing. I send my apologies for not being able to attend in person. We as a community have extensively discussed the unsightly view of the drainage pit out the front of our homes on Shaftesbury Avenue. Hence, we undertook the research to view all drainage pits within the suburb of Alexander Heights. We are quite disheartened to learn that as mostly long-term ratepayers, we do not deserve the same respect as other streets within the suburbs to have our drainage pit enclosed. This has been an ongoing issue since the pit was installed many years ago. As our petition stated, Mr Hugh Nguyen has been the only council member thus far to commit any assistance. I must say it is former councillor Mr Hugh Nguyen. He had a large number of shrubs and trees planted in front of the pit on Shaftesbury Avenue. Unfortunately, the majority of trees and shrubs were dead within months as they weren't watered, and then your council lawn mowing contractors mowed down the rest. The trees and shrubs that are already there are usually unkept and unruly. The drainage pit itself is usually full of weeds, dead grass and dumped rubbish. This does not help with the fire concern in summer months, as the residents generally have to ring the council to get the area mowed with all the dead grass and dried leaves. But we do wish to thank the council, whom in the last few weeks have sent in a clean-up crew, and it's the best it's ever looked. The area has never had so much attention in the many years since it was installed. The erection of an enclosed barrier will also assist in the noise reduction of heavy haulage vehicles, emergency vehicles and local traffic, and the weekend speeders on Hepburn Avenue, along with giving our properties a cleaner and neater view from our front yards. Planting more trees will just keep the cycle of a messy street view going for years to come, and the more plants, the harder it will be to mow in fire season. This issue not only majorly affects the aesthetic of the 4 homes it's directly in front of, but every homeowner we talked to when collecting signatures for the petition had only negative things with regard to the street look. We are asking please to have the pit enclosed by way of a solid barrier, as per the photos attached to our petition. We are also requesting no further planting of trees and shrubs as a solution to this issue. Please consider the precedent set of all the other drainage pits within our suburbs. Kind regards, Kylie Owen and David Blackwell. Our second petitioner this evening is Mr. Rocco Caradazzolo, and its response to petition PT01724, request to increase verge maintenance between Patrick Court and Our Lady Mercy Church, Girraween, and or footpath extension. Mr. Caradazzolo, could you please give us the suburb you live in and commence your deputation? Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. My name is Rocco Caradazzolo from Wanneroo, and I'm speaking on behalf of the petitioner Patrick Court, Girraween. I'm speaking on behalf of the problem with the weeds has been ongoing for years. Just because it has been tolerated does not mean that it has not been a burden. Because of its burden, it has been an area that has been mostly put aside by the volunteer team, as the challenge has been constant and overwhelming. Removing the weeds next to the footpath of Patrick Court has been an ongoing mammoth task. It is the front garden of the church grounds, therefore it is an area of importance to make it look presentable, not just for the church but also to lift the area. The reticulation in this front garden has not been connected, as it will encourage more weeds to grow towards the wet area. This is also stopping us from arranging the garden to make it look neat and presentable. On both ends of the front fence there are 2 electric gates. These weeds and soil are falling onto the tracks of the gates. On the first 3 photos, it shows the letter and photos that are presented on the 18th of March to the City of Wanneroo. I was made aware that this falls within the clause of less than 100-metre rule, and there are enough funds to address the issue, adding that we have to be passed by other departments. This was where it got stuck. There was no interest in meeting on site or interest in addressing the issue. The matrix numbers were the guide, and as he mentioned, there was too many requests, so they have to say no. The 4th photo shows a letter dated on the 28th of March that arrived from Ian Barker, saying that the matrix numbers only added to 30, not 48. Also referring to the footpath on the opposite side of the road as enough money being spent. On the 5th photo shows my reply with the email to Ian Barker and Mylon. I included Father Sam, our parish priest, to keep him up to date, informing Ian and Mylon about the 100-metre rule with enough funds to address this issue. I also paraphrased the City of Wanneroo website duties, stating, this framework provides a mechanism for the city to practice good governance and ensure that the city is able to manage the many complex legislative and governance responsibility effectively and in the best interest of the community. The email was received, neither of them replied. The duty statement has been removed from the website. I could see internal issues, therefore I decided to speak to, because I had work commitments. I spoke to Deputy Mayor James Rao, being the representative for Girraween area. He acknowledged that there was a problem with the weeds, yet even with this involvement, no one was willing to come and have a look and speak in person. On the 6th photo shows the reply from Hamish Singh to Margaret Quirk. This time the matrix score is 15. The 2 corresponding letters from the city are using the footpath on the opposite side of the road as their reason to say no and completely ignoring the problem with the weeds. As I said on my statement on the 16th of July, that footpath was funded by the Department of Transport. It is not used by pedestrians or cyclists, and it is already cracked and damaged. The footpath next to the church grounds is a direct path to the Senior Centre, Girraween Hub, Kenyon Community Hall, and Hudson Park Primary School, and it is not safe. In applying for this petition, where I approached members of the Senior Centre, they wanted to check that the problem is legit. When I went back an hour and a half later, there were 20 signatures. When I went to the public library to leave the petition, I was told, I know this is wrong, but we're not allowed to hold or sign petitions that are against the City of Wanneroo, as we're getting paid by them. On the City of Wanneroo website, the conflict of interest states, a conflict of interest exists when a city employee could be influenced on a reasonable person would perceive that they could be influenced by a personal interest when carrying out their public duties. Conflict of interest must be resolved in favour of the public interest. In this case, members of the general public going to the library were not allowed to have a say on this petition. The issue with the weeds represents a metaphor of the reality for what is not addressed at the grassroots of a problem. It will continuously impact and burden the community long term. The 7-8 attachment shows the weeds that are in a public place under the duty and care and responsibility of the City of Wanneroo. Being a narrow strip, it is hard to mow and stop the weeds going under the gate. As the photos show, the footpath on the church boundary is much narrower than the one on the opposite side. It also shows the weeds neglect and the soil being much lower than the footpath. This represents also a danger to the general public, especially mobile scooters. If one of the two wheels go onto the weeds, they will fall over and get hurt. This width area is 21 square metres, 2.1 cubic metres of concrete that cost $657. It is hard to digest and justify how something that could have been addressed appropriately at the early stages under the available 100-metre rule and funds be made so unnecessarily hard and complicated. All we're asking is for the City of Wanneroo to put a stop to these weeds getting into our garden area so we can get on with our garden duties without the unnecessary extra maintenance, lifting the spirit of the community within the church and surrounding. As I mentioned, this problem has been going for years. Spring is here, weeds and couch grass spread quickly. Unless you have a better alternative to stop the weeds coming into the church grounds, in the best interest of the community, is also to eliminate the danger of the general public. Removing the weeds and replacing it with concrete will benefit both sides of the fence, creating a safer and better view also for the general public. I will be away on a pilgrimage for the next 3 weeks. Therefore, I will not be able to attend the next meeting on the 10th of September. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Caratozzolo. Mr. Caratozzolo, I've asked our governance executive to have a look into your complaint and clarify the position of where a petition is allowed to be placed within the City of Wanneroo buildings, and we will get back to you about that. And thank you for your deputation to this.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. Our next deputation, item 3, is the consideration of Precinct 15 Central Mariginiup Local Structure Plan following advertising. The Speaker is Mr. Paul Bashall from Plan West. Mr. Bashall, would you like to take the podium and tell us the suburb you live in and proceed with your deputation? Thank you.
My name's Paul Bashall. I'm a town planning consultant representing my client who owns about 20 hectares of land in Rousset Road, Mariginiup. Just briefly, as my background, after 7 years with the government in St George's Terrace, I set up in 1981 Plan West as a small town planning consultancy. And clients have been local government, private, state, Commonwealth and so on. And I'm not without experience in preparing retail strategies, local commercial strategies, and they're called now activity centre strategies. And in fact, Plan West prepared the one for Wanneroo and Joondalup back in the last millennium. And Plan West has completed them for Stirling, South Perth, Vic Park, Kwinana, Kalgoorlie, and so on. My deputation today relates to two main issues with the local structure plan, and that is and it's more detail in my submission that I lodged during the advertising period. But basically there's two issues. One is the location of the high school site. Going back, the high school site in the East Wanneroo District Structure Plan was located north of, you'll see in the submission that I lodged, but was west of the railway line and north of the neighbourhood centre that was identified in the district plan. And it's placed central to its catchment, so it had a catchment of housing and kids around it. And it was on the edge of the urban neighbourhood of the district in the district structure plan. And that was adopted by the council, advertised, and finally approved by the WA Planning Commission. So it's gone through the ring of everybody knowing what it's doing. And suddenly the local structure plan has decided to relocate the high school in an area where it's not central to its catchment. Over half the area is in the centre, the area marked as centre and so on, and the catchment on the east side of the high school, there's no catchment there, it's recreation, parks and recreation. So it won't generate any children, which means that children that some of them will have to travel twice as far to get to that school. And one of the reasons put in the report was that it's close to recreation facilities that might be shared. Well, that's an 8.5 hectare high school site. The general accepted size is 10 hectares. There's not a lot of difference. So a 10 hectare site is ample enough to provide its own recreation facilities on the same site. Given that the railway station is about 3 or 4 kilometres apart, one of the reasons given was that it's close to the railway station for kids to get to from the station to school. Well, the area marked as a star on the district structure plan is the same distance from the existing one in the district as the local. So to say that children can't get to the station or from the station to the school is a bit of a furphy. And I'm not even sure how many kids take the train to school. The train stations are about 4 kilometres apart. The next high school is only 2 kilometres away, so I'm not sure why you would take a train. But anyway, what I've got there you've been issued with, I think, is a plan which I've revised the local structure plan with some modifications there, and I've called it Plan A. So placing the high school in that location, if you've got it there, if you can see almost in the middle left of the plan, it's originally where it was on the district structure plan and has a catchment totally around it. And what the plan also shows is the allocation of a higher density where the high school was in the local structure plan, thus giving the neighbourhood centre much better catchment for people and business. Okay, the second issue is the park and ride, which also this has been shown in figure 19 of the local structure plan, occupies about 2 hectares and is about 220 metres from the railway station. And this is more than most park and rides. They're all about 100 metres, so it's twice as far from the station. So I'm not sure whether that's good or not. I don't think it is. Also, the 2 hectares occupies an area that's marked as, I know it's diagrammatic, but it's the centre and urban neighbourhood in the district structure plan. and again resulting in the loss of density around the neighbourhood centre. And the administration's comment in the assessment of the submissions said that the park and ride patrons would go through the centre to enhance the economic activity, vibrancy and transit experience. Well, I'm not sure about that, and I haven't seen any, in park and ride areas, any shopping trolleys left over to demonstrate that park and ride patrons do any shopping of substance in these centres. Again, the Plan A shows the park and ride shifted to the west side of the railway. I can't see any reason why it shouldn't be on the west side, and it allocates the 2 hectares for centre to allow for the more commercial and activity centre activities. And I'm a bit disappointed, as I said there in the comments on the submission parts, which I delineated as issue 1, issue 2 and issue 3, that seemed bent on saying no modification required without properly addressing the components of the submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Bashall. Our 4th deputation this evening is consideration of Precinct 15, Central Marigini Local Structure Plan following advertising. The Speaker is Ms Madison Burzens from Stockland, Candice Helene from CDP Town Planning and Damien Shepherd from Stockland. Would you like to take the podium and give us the suburb you live in? Thank you.
Firstly, thank you for the opportunity to make a deputation on item 6.1, which is the Precinct 15 Local Structure Plan this evening. As mentioned, my name is Madison Burzens. I'm a Development Manager at Stockland, and with me are Damien Shepherd, who is a Development Director at Stockland, and Candice Helene, who is a Principal Planner for CDP Town Planning. The main reason we wanted to speak to you tonight was just to introduce you to a small part of the team who has been working on the Precinct 15 Local Structure Plan since 2022, but also importantly to acknowledge the Office's report and the recommendation to Council, including the recommended schedule of modifications on the LSP. We really do appreciate the efforts made by the City's officers, particularly Mark Dixon, Greg Bowering and Dan Sheehan, who's the Assessing Officer for the LSP, in preparing their recommendation to the WPC for consideration at the September Council meeting. We do note that there are a number of issues, many of which are interrelated, that do need to be worked through in consultation with the City and DPLH before the local structure plan can be finalised. This includes the resolution of many state government-led issues which will require the detailed and targeted engagement with both DPLH and other state government agencies following the City's recommendation to WAPC. Stockland are very committed to working with DPLH as well as continuing to work with the City to progress these issues over the coming months. Addressing many of these issues is likely to result in a number of refinements or changes to the proposed land use structure under the local structure plan. And we do acknowledge that re-advertising of the local structure plan to landowners affected by any of those land use changes is probably likely to be required following assessment by DPLH. And we are fully supportive of this transparent process. I'm sure many of you have heard of Stockland before. We are an established, experienced developer across Perth, and we're actually currently the City of Wanneroo's largest development partner. We really do value the long-standing relationship with the City that Stockland has, and this has been developed over many years during some of our previous projects, such as Carimbia in Lansdale, Ashdale Gardens in Darch, as well as in some of our active communities, such as Amberton Beach in Eglinton and Iliari in Sinagra. I'm actually a state planner by background and have recently moved into the private sector working for Stockland. And honestly, working for this developer, I can say that they really are dedicated to great community, urban design, planning, land use and environmental outcomes. I've seen it myself. And it's on this basis that we would like to continue to engage in an open and collaborative process with the City and DPLH to finalise the Precinct 15 local structure plan. Between the three of us, we're more than happy to assist in answering any questions from councillors once the agenda item has been presented by the City later tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Burzins. We now go to deputation number 5, which is consideration of Precinct 15, Central Marigini Local Structure Plan, item 6.1, and it's Mr Neil Teo from Dynamic Planning. Mr Teo, could you come down and just give us the suburb you live in? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, councillors and officers. My name is Neil Teo from Dynamic Planning. Our office represents the landowner of lots 17 and 13 Lakeview Road, which is Lakeview Estates development. I think I'll just start by saying that, our client applauds the LSP that's been prepared. We do appreciate that there's a lot of issues that have to be balanced and dealt with. Planning is a balance of juggling all these items and trying to produce the best outcome. So on balance, we are supportive of the structure plan that's been prepared by the proponent, and we applaud the applicant as well for approaching this structure plan in trying to avoid a cost contribution or developer contribution arrangement. There are 3 items, though, in our submission which should be in front of you, and if I draw your attention to figures 2 and 3, which are those coloured maps that may assist in what I'm about to speak about. Figure 2 is the structure plan that was advertised, and figure 3 is a markup of what we as the representative of our client were seeking to ask the city to consider. So the first item is in regard to lot 13, the eastern portion at the moment is proposed for a centre zoning. Now the railway that's been shown through the East Wanneroo District Structure Plan affecting this site is to be an underground railway. We are seeking for the western side of this lot 13 to be proposed for the same zoning. The ideology behind that is, we're thinking that the neighbourhood centre is on the eastern side of the railway reserve, and on the western side, that could be for your big box type of service, commercial type of uses. It's got great access. It's the logical point to facilitate that sort of use for the future residential community that would be in that area. I think the review of the city's administration response is that, it would look at that further down the line when the Department for Planning have further involvement and discussion around that train line. We ask that, the barometer at the moment is the East Wanneroo District Structure Plan. It shows the railway line as an underground line, and we should be making planning assessments and decisions based on that knowledge at this point in time. The second matter relates to lot 17. That's the sort of the longer north-south lot. And that's in regard to public open spaces that's shown in the northwestern corner of our lot. The structure plan documents, locate public open space primarily around areas where there's remnant vegetation or drainage purposes for drainage corridors in lower lying areas. Those attributes don't represent anything on that northwestern corner of lot 17. We say through our submission that's actually better to be further located eastwards. There are opportunities to deal with public open space through cash in lieu contributions to still make an equitable form of public open space. So if I revert back to the city's administration comment, it kind of just glances over the issue and doesn't deal with that in detail. We say that that's a situation that really ought to be looked at in more detail now. And lastly, there's a new item which wasn't advertised, which affects our client's land holding. There's a district community centre and a portion of lot 13. We understand the logic for it to be, located within a neighbourhood centre, and that's not the issue. The issue is probably more so how the structure plan deals with a community infrastructure and how the landowners affected by that facility are compensated. So I think I'd ask the city staff to consider that in its recommendation to council. Otherwise, though, we are very much on board to see the structure plan progress. It's a great milestone, and again, we thank the council for its time. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr Teo. We have one more deputation this evening, and that is from David Donis about item 4.4.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Madam Mayor, appreciate the time. On the subject of the road safety on Wanneroo Road, I'd like to...
Just quickly, Mr Donis, can you tell us the suburb you live in,
Oh,
please?
Wanneroo, your Jacaranda Drives, precisely.
Thank you.
So just pertaining to the safety on Wanneroo Road at the moment, I understand that there's several designs going on. I've seen surveyors out on Wanneroo Road this week on the East Road intersection. And I made some inquiries today as to what the plan was, and as I understand it, I may be incorrect, the surveyors were out there today to look at putting in a footpath, which has long been proposed for the eastern side of Wanneroo Road. I think that doesn't so much go to solving the problem that is the whole corridor between particularly Jacaranda Drive, where the professional centre is, and the East Road intersection, where the road, bends twice, and the traffic problems are quite difficult in the morning and in the afternoon. As I frequent East Road and Jacaranda Drive quite a bit, I know the pains of getting across Wanneroo Road both in the morning and in the evenings. And what I guess suggest to, I know that there's probably a lot of different proposals to fix the East Road intersection problem. And what I'd point to as a solution for a problem which I see working quite well is the intersection outside the McDonald's at the Kingsway Shopping Centre, where we have the slipway to turn north and the traffic lights only affecting the southbound lane on Wanneroo Road. I'm sure that the council is familiar with that intersection. I believe that in that same intersection on East Road, there's plenty of room for a slipway to go up the hill to get the traffic out onto Wanneroo Road northbound, which doesn't impede on the traffic flow in the afternoons northbound, which people definitely wouldn't want stopping at lights at that intersection to continue north. But also gives an opportunity for people to pull out and actually get northbound, whereas in the afternoons that's nigh on impossible. In fact, I tend to avoid it in the afternoons because of that. I understand that there's several residents in both Timberlands Estate and Regent Waters that have submitted petitions to do several different things to the Scenic Drive and Jacaranda Drive intersections. Proposals, everything from traffic lights to lowering of the speed limit so that it's easier to come out onto Wanneroo Road. I don't think that those options would be able to solve that issue. However, I think that with the East Road intersection idea that I've just proposed, as the traffic is forced to brake and provide a break in the traffic for people to pull out on Scenic Drive and Jacaranda Drive, that would be an effective way of mitigating the constant traffic flow which people find concerning crossing onto Wanneroo Road. I guess the idea of a footpath across there is quite, it's dangerous as it is, as cars come around that corner. The visuals are very difficult for cars, let alone pedestrians, trying to get across that road to get to the bus stoppers, particularly on the northern side. So, though it's, a very expensive option, an underground pedestrian tunnel under the road would be ideal, but I don't think that's probably going to happen. But there has to be some option for, the safe passage of pedestrians, obviously. So I guess, my focus tonight would just be to bring to the attention the traffic issues, and I'm not sure if the council's even considered potentially that being an option. I also believe that there's some idea of potential roundabout at that intersection, using the surrounding drainage pits as space to provide that roundabout there. I don't think that would be suitable as well, given the speeds in which cars travel down the road. Though I do think that 70 speed limit is quite sufficient. I wouldn't advocate for lowering the speed limit at all. In fact, I'd think that it was a terrible idea to lower the speed limit, just after between Jacaranda Drive and San Rosa. I think that was totally unnecessary as well, but it is what it is. So just going forward, I guess I'd advocate for a more long-term common sense approach for this. So thank you for your time, and I appreciate the council's attention.
Thank you, Mr Donners. Mr Singh, would you like to outline what we're doing about this? There has been an increase in traffic speed and the difficulty of getting out of East Road, and we acknowledge that, so we are working on that. Could you tell them what we're doing, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. First of all, Wanneroo Road is actually a state government road managed through Main Roads WA. So we are working with Main Roads on in particular, the intersection of East Road and Wanneroo Road. The last update we received from Main Roads was that they have prepared a black spot submission to be submitted to upgrade that intersection, and they still haven't determined a solution. The options which were mentioned in the deputation could be considered by Main Roads as part of that potential treatment, but what's possible at that particular site. In addition to that one, we do meet with Main Roads quite regularly to discuss any other safety issues in and around Wanneroo Road and several other roads. We're also considering upgrading a number of sections of footpaths in Wanneroo Road, which are quite complex projects in their own right. There is a black spot project which has already been approved for construction, that is at the intersection of Wanneroo Road and Elliott Road, which we'll be constructing a couple of slip lanes there.
Thank you, Mr Singh. We now go to the agenda proper. Declarations of interest by council members, including the nature and extent of which the interest, are to be made at the commencement of the item to which the interest relates. Declarations of interest forms are to be completed and handed to the Chief Executive Officer. We now go to planning sustainability. Thank you, Mr Dixon and Mr Bowering. Are there any items you'd like to speak to this evening on your part of the agenda?
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. There are 3 reports on the main agenda and 1 late report from the Planning and Sustainability Directorate. I would like to briefly introduce the late report, item 6.1, consideration of Precinct 15 Central Mariginiup Local Structure Plan, and Mr Bowering and myself would be happy to answer questions on the other 3 reports. Mayor, with regard to Precinct 15, this is the first local structure plan in the East Wanneroo District Structure Plan area to be considered by Council. It was advertised earlier this year and a total of 35 submissions were received. A summary of the submissions and administration's responses are provided in attachments 8 and 9 of your agenda. Following the conclusion of the advertising period, administration requested an updated plan, which has been provided by the proponent, showing a realigned transit corridor in accordance with the latest advice provided by the Public Transport Authority, and the proposed location of a district community centre and indoor recreation centre. The amended plan is included as attachment 10 to your report this evening. Administration is recommending that the local structure plan be approved, subject to the modifications in attachment 4 being addressed and re-advertising occur once these issues are resolved. Mayor, we acknowledge that we are in a housing crisis at the moment. It is important that local structure plans are progressed as soon as possible to enable provision of new residential lots. We do not want to delay this process from occurring, but equally, the modifications that we are recommending to you should be considered and addressed between the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, the proponent and key stakeholders, including your city administration, prior to the local structure plan being approved by the West Australian Planning Commission. Mayor and councillors, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Are there any questions on this item? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Just on page 29, part of the recommended modifications, focusing on number 11 there, which says clause 4.4 to be renamed to transit station infrastructure, and just noting the comment in there, and just for clarity, because I've heard multiple times tonight about a rail corridor. So by the looks of it, administration received advice from the Public Transport Authority and DPLH that the transit corridor will not be accommodating rail-based transit. Can you please confirm that, and if it's supposed to be any other sort of public transport?
Mr Dixon.
I note that in the East Wanneroo District Structure Plan, it refers to both potential for a rail line or other rapid transit corridor. At the moment, and we still haven't received confirmation, but the likelihood is that, and that design still needs to be undertaken by the PTA and the Department of Planning, but the likelihood is it will be a rapid transit dedicated bus link. That's still to be confirmed, but that is the current advice that we've received from the state government.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Just on page 38, recommendation number 38, which was around tourism opportunities to be removed from the map. Could administration please clarify and provide some more context on that recommendation?
Mr Dixon.
Through you, Mayor, I think, and just bear with me a second, well, I've got so many attachments on here, it's probably useful to refer you to attachment 1 on page 24. So the tourism opportunities are identified within the East Wanneroo District Structure Plan to the east of Lake Dundebar. There's a strip of land which is just to the east, which you can see as tourism opportunities in the key. I think that is principally outside of precinct 15 and in another precinct. So I think that's essentially what that's referring to. It's not to say that we don't want tourism opportunities within the area, but that's the location of where that should be focused.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in regards to recommendation 51 on page 40, it says all intersections along Franklin Road being modified on the plan to be signalised. I'm just wanting some confirmation around how many of those intersections that are currently in the plan that are supposed to be roundabouts that have now changed or will be changed to signalised.
Mr Dixon.
I'll take that on notice because I don't want to give you the wrong answer. It's quite a detailed question. I will refer to the traffic impact assessment and give you a number if that's what you're looking for, Councillor.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just to go back to that item that Councillor Wright brought up on page 29 under 11 with the transit corridor. And whilst I agree we need to have a corridor put in place, I have no problem with that. If that's going through what is going to be the proposed, I guess, town centre component of that land, is it still going to be a below-ground corridor so we can utilise the top and not have a great big swathe of area cut out so people can't transit across?
Mr Dixon.
Thank you, Mayor. So the transit corridor is currently shown within precinct 15 and also is reflected in the other local structure plans, precinct 7 and 8, which will be coming to council shortly, is running to the west of the neighbourhood centre. My understanding at the moment is that it will be an at-grade transit corridor, as I mentioned before, likely to be a dedicated rapid transit bus route. So it will be at grade. It's likely to be a wide reserve because it will also need to accommodate for other traffic movements. So one of the issues I think that administration acknowledges needs to be addressed is the opportunity for traversing that from east to west, and so the importance of providing appropriate safe connectivity and links so that if residents are on one side and the activity centres on the other or schools, then there's an opportunity for our residents to be able to manoeuvre across safely.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Councillor Miles.
Yeah, just to follow up, Mayor, with one of the deputations from Mr Bashall, where he was sort of talking about this as part of his, because of the high school site and what have you, he was a bit concerned that, and Mr Teo, concerned that we hadn't addressed their submissions in the right manner, or they wanted more information. Can you add anything further to what both of those planners were referring to in their deputations?
Mr Dixon.
Thank you. I can provide further clarity for council's benefit. So with regard to Mr Bashel's comments, he raised two issues. One is the location of the high school, I think, which Mr Bashel has indicated and thinks should be located to the west of the rapid transit corridor and not shown in the local structure plan between the neighbourhood centre and the regional open space. I think administration's position is that it's supportive of the proposed high school location that's currently shown, which will benefit from its co-location with the regional open space. It's in close proximity to the proposed rapid transit station, only a short distance further to the east from the station that's currently proposed. And in administration's view, will help activate the neighbourhood centre. Having high school children in close proximity to a centre will support businesses that will obviously in the future operate from that centre. Notwithstanding administration's view and Mr Bashel's view, I think the location of the high school will be one of the matters that will need to be considered by both the Department of Education and the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage and other stakeholders before the local structure plan is eventually approved by the West Australian Planning Commission. It's probably one of the bigger issues that still needs to be resolved and addressed. But administration's position, I think we have responded to that query and I'm comfortable with administration's recommendation to you. The second issue raised by Mr Bashel was the location of the park and ride facility, which is shown on figure 19, which is page 100 of your report. Figure 19 is just an illustrative master plan in part 2 of the local structure plan, so it has no statutory weight. It's a concept, essentially it's a concept drawing. Any future location of a park and ride facility can and should be considered with the PTA and other stakeholders as part of the planning of the future neighbourhood centre. And with that in mind, I think one of the other modifications administration's recommending to you is that a local development plan be prepared for that neighbourhood centre to guide the future planning and land use provision within the centre. With regard to Mr Teo, he raised 3 issues. The first was allowing service commercial land uses on the area of Lot 13 to the west of the neighbourhood centre. Administration does not support that position. We think those uses are better located in the neighbourhood centre or the employment land in Precinct 23, which is just to the east of Precinct 15. And no justification has been provided for the need of service commercial land. So having said that, it's also an issue that obviously has been raised, will need to be considered by the state government in responding to the comments that have been raised. Removal of the public open space from precincts 17 and 13. One of the recommended modifications is to consider overall distribution of public open space. Within the structure plan, we've made a suggested modification regarding a number of areas of public open space, and that will in itself need to result in a potential redistribution of public open space. Again, an issue that can be considered by the state government. And I think Mr Teo also raised in his deputation and in his submission questions around density of residential development in lots 13 and 17. That is another recommended modification from administration. We're not comfortable with the densities proposed in the local structure plan at the moment. We think it should more closely align with the densities identified in the district structure plan, with the proviso of providing transit, supporting higher density close to the neighbourhood centre, the station and open space. So that is again another modification that administration's recommending. I'm sorry, it's a long-winded response, but I think that covers off on all of the issues raised.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Councillor Wright, do you have another question?
Thank you, Mayor. I've just got my last question on this item. Just on page 18 of the late items agenda, it talks about Indigenous heritage, and I always get a bit on edge when documents are restricted from councillors or redacted, one of the questions was in regards to why hasn't this been provided as a confidential attachment rather than actually redacted so councillors can't see. That was my first question. And my second question was just in regards to that Indigenous heritage site. Is it on any of our own registers? Because I know we are doing a review at the moment. And does that have any impact on that particular site?
Mr Dixon.
Thank you, Matt. I will take that question on notice. We did receive advice, and I'm struggling to remember exactly what that advice was, noting that the attachment has been provided to council in either through the website or on the hub. So there is information that was redacted when that attachment was intended to be within the public domain, based on advice we received from relevant agencies. So I'll take the question on notice and provide a proper response to Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mr Dixon. Any other questions, councillors? If there are no other questions, we will go to item 4.1. Did you want to speak to any of the other items, Mr Bowring? No? Okay, we go to item 4.1, consideration of amendment 211 to District Planning Scheme number 2, following advertising part normalisation of the East Wanneroo Cell 5 Landsdale Structure Plan number 7 area. Councillors, do we have any questions on that item? If we have no questions on that item, we go to item 4.2, consideration of amendment number 212 to District Planning Scheme number 2, following advertisement, part normalisation of the Butler Ridgewood Agreed Local Structure Plan number 27 and revocation of Brighton Village Agreed Local Structure Plan number 38. Councillors, do we have any questions on that item? If there are no questions, I go to item 4.3, preparation of amendment of number 224 to District Planning Scheme number 2, normalisation of land in the lots 1 and 102 Yanchep Beach Road, Yanchep, Jindawi West, Agreed Local Structure Plan number 40, and lots 1 and 2 Yanchep Beach Road, Yanchep, Jindawi East, Agreed Local Structure Plan number 76. Do I have any questions on that item, councillors? If there are no questions on that item, we now go to assets. Thank you, Mr Dixon and Mr Bowring. Good evening, Mr Singh. Are there any items on this evening's agenda that you'd like to speak to?
Thank you, Mayor. Now, I don't intend to present any of those reports. I got 4 reports in the main agenda and 1 in the supplementary, and we'll be happy to respond to any questions council members may have.
Thank you. Councillors, do I have any questions on item 4.4, Road Safety Management Plan? Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I say the report's very good? Thank you, Mr Singh and Mr Barker. The only question I had was in relation to the stats within the report proper, and it obviously dictates how many incidences we've had, how many people have died, and so forth. But there's no location of those. Have you got that data where we can see where those people have been injured or where those crashes have been identified? Because it would be nice to know whether there is something that we need to look at as a council in those areas, or whether it's near something important like a school or even a nursing home.
Mr Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. The crash data is available through Main Roads WA through the website. We'll look at how much information is available from there, and we can share that with the council members.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Are there any other questions? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had one question on this item, and I know Councillor Bedworth has previously brought this up. Just in regards to the management plan itself, was a pretty good plan, but just in regards to, I guess, tangible projects that the council, there's nothing in that plan that states anything around, traffic treatments or whatever the case is, but I do know that we have that information in other documents. Is there any way that that can form part of the management plan as a public document to know that these are what the city's 20-year plan is on, addressing traffic treatments or, those types of issues. So residents know there is actually a capital expenditure that is happening, as well as just the other education component of it.
Mr. Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. As Council Wright, I think, had touched on it already, that we do have our local area traffic management policy, which provide guidance on where traffic treatments are needed. We also access the state black spot program, state and federal, and we also look at other opportunities for road safety projects that all form part of the long-term financial plan, long-term capital works program, and then on annual budgets. We'll see if there's any capacity to add a link or provide a paragraph on the long-term local area traffic management policy in this plan. If that is possible, we'll include that.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Any other questions, councillors? I have a question, I suppose. Do we have a separate category now that we have e-ridables? Would that be appropriate? Because we have pedestrian crashes, we have motorcycle crashes, and we have bicycle crashes. Do e-ridables come under motorcycle crashes? Thank you, Mr. Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We understand that separately identified in crash data from main roads. So main roads do get compile all the data. The e-ridable crashes are captured separately, so it can be identified.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions on this item? If there are no questions, we go to item 4.5, response to petition PT02 724, request for solid fencing of Shaftesbury Avenue Drainage Basin, Alexander Heights. Do we have any questions on this item? Yes, Councillor Herridge. Sorry, Deputy Mayor Rowe.
Okay, that's okay.
The hand went up and you both had black hands, black arms, clothes, you know what I mean?
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Mayor. A couple of questions. The first, through yourself, Mayor, is in terms of the report mentions that when Hepburn Avenue was duplicated, that this section of land was ultimately chosen for a drainage sump. This question, no notice has been provided, so I do apologise. Why was the drainage sump installed on this side of the road rather than the Lansdale side of the road being Hepburn Park? Is it due to the classification of the land or some other reason that it appeared in Alexander Heights and not Lansdale?
Mr. Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. I probably will have to look back at the design drawings from that point. My general comment would be it's based on the catchment, drainage catchment requirements for that area, and then finding the best possible location for the sump, where basically you're going to go to the low points, and sumps are generally at the low points.
Deputy Mayor Rowe.
The second question is regarding precedent, because it's been referred to in the original petition and then also in the deputation that was written to us tonight. They have cited a number of examples of drainage sumps across the entire suburb, some of which have fully enclosed fencing, colour-bond fencing, others do not. The administration in the report is saying that those are installed at the expense of the developer. Is that correct for all of the fully enclosed drainage sumps that have been identified by the lead petitioner, that it is not paid for by the city, but paid for by a developer?
Mr. Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. That's my understanding, that those colour-bond fencing for those sumps has been provided by the developers.
Do we have any? Deputy Mayor Rowe.
Thank you, Mayor. In the comment section on page 219, the administration advises that the inclusion of any solid fencing would have a negligible impact in reducing traffic noise. It does not provide any evidence in the report to substantiate that claim. I think back, Mayor, if you quickly allow me just the context to say, Councillor Miles a couple of years ago brought us a motion about noise barrier walls, and anyone who are living very close to main arterial roads have that noise pollution. they don't have the ability to have noise barrier walls, and in this case, a fully open and transparent drainage sump. So I suppose my question is, what evidence does the administration have that solid fencing would not block or mitigate some of the noise pollution?
Mr Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. That is more of a general comment in the report, not specifically based on a noise assessment done for that particular site. I must say that there was a noise assessment done for Hepburn Avenue along that section of the road when the road was initially constructed and duplicated. And at that time, the decision made by council was not to provide any noise attenuation measures, no noise walls at that time. Similar decision has been made in the subsequent dual carriageway constructions. Council has not provided any noise walls or for any of those roads. And also under the state planning policy, I think that is more of a guide. It doesn't apply to the local roads managed by the local authorities. It doesn't place a requirement as such to provide noise walls for those roads.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Deputy Mayor Rowe.
Thank you, Mayor. My ward councillor is not here, so I feel like I'm stealing her questions tonight as well. The city's recommendation includes number 3 being to undertake additional planting. The lead petitioner and the deputation advised that that occurred upon request from a council member several years ago, but those plants/shrubs and trees weren't retained. They've alleged it was due to a lack of watering from the city and then ultimately mowing going over the site. So I just want administration's confirmation, if that solution failed several years ago, why is it being recommended as the solution once again this time over?
Mr Chettleberg.
Through you, Mayor, I'm not aware of those circumstances where that may have happened in the past. In regards to future plantings of trees, we would ensure that any maintenance activities that those trees were protected. We have standards in place now for when we're planting trees to make sure they're planted with a stake either side to protect them. On a site inspection last week, I couldn't see any evidence of where our maintenance activities had compromised the trees at the site, but we would, looking forward, make sure that we protected any vegetation that we planted.
Thank you, Mr Chettleberg. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Herridge.
Thank you, Mayor. I just thought of one. We often have these come to us in multiples. Has this come to us before, or is this the first of its kind for this particular site?
Mr Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. I need to check that one. I can't recall petition for that particular site come to us before.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had one question in regards to the drainage basins. And I remember within the Central Ward we had issues with the Elliott Road one, and from that CRM was told that the city was phasing out the colour bonding fencing and putting in the garrison fencing for existing sites. Is that still the case?
Mr Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. I received some advice this evening from our team. We have replaced some of the fencing, different sumps with garrison-style fencing where there is a high level of antisocial activity, where either fence has been cut, whether it is chain link fencing or it's a colour bond fencing, constantly getting damaged. That's where we have replaced them with garrison fencing.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Deputy Mayor Rowe, did you have a question?
Yes, Mayor. I think I've only got 2 more. One of them is regarding an ongoing discussion that we've had about in established suburbs, you often see a surplus of drainage sumps and pedestrian access ways. Has the city considered any programs or project ideas of how we can develop those drainage sumps? Other councils are considering turning them into wetland spaces or something that ensures that it's not an eyesore, it is still retaining some vibrancy or use in the area, given that we've got a surplus of them and there seems to be no long-term plan of how we're either phasing it out or developing the land. Is there anything in place that we're investigating about what we can do with these drainage sumps that are clearly causing some problems in the community?
Mr Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We had some early discussions on that particular matter. It has been raised by council members before, but it hasn't actually translated into a capital works program project where we can look at a particular sump as a pilot study and see if we can what's involved in converting a sump into a usable land and where to direct that water to. That water which gets to a certain low point has to go somewhere else in that case. So we have to look at in more detail what are the complexities involved. That hasn't translated into a project yet.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Mr Dixon, I remember having a talk with you about sumps a year or so ago and understood that there was looking at a project about sumps. Is that correct, Mr Dixon?
It is, Mayor, and thank you for reminding me of that issue that you raised. So a number of meetings were held between various parts of the organisation in terms of looking at potential retrofitting and beautifying existing sumps. As Mr Singh has pointed out, due to other workload priorities, that hasn't progressed at this stage, but it's still an issue that I think we need to consider and address. And as Mr Singh identified, I think there's an opportunity to look at some potential pilot projects. The predominant issue was with regard to not just beautification, but also dealing with the water and where the water would run to if it wasn't provided to a particular sump. But it's still on administration's to-do list, and we haven't given up in consideration of that matter.
Mr Dixon and Mr Singh, would you be able to forward us a report on where that is at the moment and share that with the councillors, please? And thank you. Any other questions on this item? Deputy Mayor Rowe.
Thank you, Mayor. I will reserve the right to foreshadow an amendment, an alternative next week. I do want to ask the question, though. The city's provided us with financial costings of an estimate of $40,000 for a fence that would go along the entire 220-metre perimeter of the drainage sump. Did the city consider the possibility of only fencing the length of the drainage sump that actually faces the property? So instead of it being a rectangular fence, only the actual part which a fence could potentially block the noise and block the view from the residents of what's in the sump.
Mr Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. No, we haven't, but if that's what council decides, yeah, we can consider that.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Any other questions on this item? If there are no questions, we now go to item 4.6, response to petition PTO 1724, request to increase verge maintenance between Patrick Court and Our Lady of Mercy Church, Girraween, and/or footpath extension. Councillors, do I have any questions on this item? Deputy Mayor Rowe.
It's only these two items, Mayor, promise. First off, I'll foreshadow impartiality interest on this one for next week. The second is that the city is the question is that the city is referring in its comments to the implementation of the master plan concept. That's obviously an advocacy item subject to securing funding, which we don't know exactly when that may occur. Is that the administration's recommendation that we await funding before we consider the potential upgrade of that particular footpath that connects Girraween Avenue to the various community services in the hub precinct?
Mr Singh.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As council members may be aware, we have gone out for tender for design services for Girraween Hub. That period started yesterday. So the intention is that to continue with the design after we appoint the lead architect or lead consultant. And then if we are successful in receiving funding, then go to construction, I think it's early 2026 onwards. The understanding is that as part of detailed design, there may be provisions for some parking bays or some modification to infrastructure in Patrick Court, adjoining where this particular location is. Therefore, it will be premature to do any other infrastructure works until we know exactly what could be done there and what funding will become available and timeframes are more firmed up.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Did you have another question, Deputy Mayor Rowe?
Thanks, Mayor. The deputation referred to the matrix that the city uses to determine where pathway requests are in their particular policy program. The deputation referred to the fact that there was differing responses that came back from the city. The first being that it was not ranked high, but nonetheless could qualify, and the second that it would not meet the requirements of the policy. And from the deputation, he felt that the city's position had changed. So I just wanted to give the administration a chance to comment on if that was the case, and if so, why.
Mr. Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, we're happy to sit down with the petitioner and clarify what those correspondence meant. In fact, the pathway policy does score low if there is an existing footpath on the other side of the road. Why we have to assess this under the pathway policy was that given there is existing path, we can't just add 300 mil concrete next to the path. That's practically not possible in that sense, right? Given that it's right at the boundaries construction point of view. So we had to replace the full length of the path to what the petitioner has requested. So therefore, we had to do the assessment under the pathway policy. Pathway policy does not say it does qualify or not qualify. It just ranks each path in an order of merit. So it does get a score, and the top scores get constructed. So in a nutshell, that's how the policy works. When, if required, we're happy to speak to the petitioner or explain that in more detail, what the information they received, what it means.
Thank you, Mr. Singh. Any other questions? Deputy Mayor Rowe, and then I'll go to Councillor Smith.
Just the last one, Mayor. From my reading of the report, the administration is saying that the path has a width of 1.5 metres and that there's the potential for it to be 1.8 metres in width. Can the city advise what is the standard width of a path for a newly approved pathway rather than the ones that we have in established suburbs? I just think it has reflection back to what Councillor Wright's motion was on mobility. That's a question, and I'll word it as, is the path of 1.5 metres in width actually accessible for people accessing the services in the area?
Mr. Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. The minimum width required is 1.5 metres. So it is 1.5 at the moment.
Thank you. And Councillor Smith, you had a question?
Thank you, Mayor. I refer to the third recommendation, which notes that in consultation with the petition, organiser admin will consider the implementation of a seasonal weed control program. My question is, could admin explain why it's just consideration at this point? So what are the aspects that need to be considered and how much time that would take? Thank you.
Mr. Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. We need to consult with the resident. Given that ordinarily the maintenance of the adjoining verge is a responsibility of the property owner, but given the circumstances and the location, this particular one, we have suggesting in this one, if council approves, we can consult with the property owner, being the petitioner or the representative of the owners, and work with them to implement a seasonal weed control. So they need to agree to what we do there.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Herridge.
Thank you, Mayor. Just indulge for a moment. I'm looking at the deputy's pictures. In my mind, regardless of whether we do a 1.5 or a 1.8, it won't eradicate the problem. Is that correct?
Mr. Singh.
Sorry, I'm just trying to, through you, Mayor, trying to clarify the problem between the footpath and the fence.
I'm understanding that the petitioner is asking for a wider footpath to decrease the size of what the allowance is of the weeds. So even if we widen that footpath, it's going to go both ways. It's not going to take up the rest of that space because you can only go to a certain spot that's on the border. It won't actually eradicate the problem.
I think what Councillor Herridge is saying, looking at the vision there, if we go to 1.8, we will still have a gap between the owner's fence and the footpath, so the problem won't go away even if we go to 1.8 metres. Is that correct, Mr. Singh?
No, I'll just clarify that. I think what the petitioner is seeking is to fill the gap between the footpath and the fence. Don't widen the footpath toward the roadside, widen the footpath toward the property side. So that's what they're seeking. That's where the difficulty is.
Thank you. Any other questions? If there are no more questions, we go to item 4.7, tender 24034, the renewal of play equipment, softball and installation of shade-style structures. Please, councillors, note we have confidential attachments, and should there be any discussion required for the confidential attachments, then all recording must be ceased and members of the public exit the chambers and the chambers doors must be closed. Councillors, do I have any questions on item 4.7? And that's not on a confidential attachment, Councillor Wright. Go ahead, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in regards to the play equipment and those sorts of upgrades, is there a community consultation process for those, or is it a standard sort of template that we use for those playground equipments?
Mr Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. It's the letter one, the standard one.
So just confirming there is no community consultation for each individual parks, or is that a different process from, say, like your Rotary parks and those types of facilities?
Mr Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. In this particular case, we'll be advising those residents in the vicinity that this work is happening in that particular park.
Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just to clarify what Councillor Wright was saying, Mr Singh, so I'm assuming that once you actually award the tender, administration has already done all the consultation for these sites. We don't go to a tender to replace equipment without community consultation being done first. Is that correct?
Mr Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. This is for, that happens for the new equipment, when new equipment goes in there with the options or the concept. In this case, it's all renewals. So most cases, renewals will be informing the community that this renewal is occurring, and we'll provide the timeframes.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Just to clarify, these tenders are for asset replacement. As assets have worn out, they're not for changing the style of assets in the parks. Is that correct, Mr Singh?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think that's correct, but only proviso is in case we need to comply with the current standards. There may be some elements may be different.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Councillor Miles.
Yeah, just to go back on that, Mayor, my understanding is I think Community in Place still do some level of letter, drop and consultation. I can be wrong, but I believe that they still do that to offer up some form of, you know, because obviously people grow up. So I guess I'm just trying to get some clarification on whether that has been done or we don't do that.
Mr Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. In some cases that happens. I think example is last year we replaced a structure in Tapping Eiffel Park, I think it was. In that case, the replacement was going to be not at like for like, it was going to be more a different structure. So in that case, we did consult with the community on 2 or 3 options we developed at the time. So even though that was asset renewal or asset replacement, some consultation happened. But in majority of these cases, it is more informing the community that this is occurring. But the majority of the cases, it will be like for like kind of replacement.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Councillor Wright.
Sorry, thank you, Mayor. So if the city is using a standard template, which I don't believe there is any issues with that, is there any possible of those templates being sent to councillors, so when we do get inquiries from residents that we do have an understanding of what that replacement will be? I understand there'll be local context involved, but just, you know, what the standard equipment is, just so residents understand, because I think sometimes there was some issues around going out for advertisement, asking for community consultation, and that was the last design they saw, and then the final design was never released to the public, and then there was a big change that happened. So that was more my worries around what the final concept plan is, so people actually understand what is happening, as opposed to going out with one thing and then going out to tender for another.
Mr Singh.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We can do that. When we send the letters out to residents, we can provide those letters to the ward councillors. And we also provide updates through Wanneroo app when the construction is about to start.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Any other questions? Mr Figg. Sorry, Councillor Figg.
Thank you, Mayor. May I ask, was any consideration given to bringing this sort of renewal back in-house, given that it's a recurring program?
Mr Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. The type of work, this is more, we're not set up for that kind of work. This requires a different kind of contractors, different specialities. That's why it's contracted out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Singh. Any other questions? If there are no more questions, we now go to Community in Place. Thank you, Mr Singh.
Sorry, Mayor, we have one supplementary agenda item for Parks Maintenance Tender. Item 6.2.
Oh, yes. 6.2, Tender 24043, provision of Jindalee, Alkimos and Eglinton Street Skate Park and maintenance. And once again, I think there's a confidential attachment to that. So if any of the councillors want to speak to the confidential attachment, we will need to go behind closed doors because that will be unable to be heard by public. Do we have any questions on item 6.2? If there are no questions on item 6.2, we now go to community in place. Thank you, Mr Singh and Mr Chettleberg. Ms Davis, are there any items that you wish to speak to this evening?
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. Community in Place does have 4 items for Council this round, of which I'd like to invite the Manager of Community Safety Emergency Management to introduce item 4.9, the Bushfire Advisory Terms of Reference.
Ms Thrush, thank you.
Thank you. So our Bushfire Advisory Committee, known as BFAC, was established to provide advice to Council on matters relating to the Bushfires Act. The current terms of reference were adopted in 2018, and at the BFAC meeting held 24th of June, it was agreed that they will require review. Attachment 3 to your paper is the proposed new terms of reference. Staff propose to amend these prior to the Council meeting next week to make minor administrative changes and also to delete clause 3.2, which reads, "In the absence of the chairperson, the Director, Community in Place will assume the chair. The Director is not a voting member and so cannot take this role. However, 3.1 of the Terms of Reference allows the delegate to fill the position of chairperson if the nominated representative is not available. It is therefore considered that 3.2 is unnecessary." Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms Thrush. I have a question that I want to ask. Because it's the Bushfire Advisory Committee, and we know that we've got the Tranche 2 coming up, what's discussed there, some of the issues that are discussed are confidential between departments. Should this be a working group considering the committee has to be published to the public and open to the public? I'm just asking that question if that has been considered, because reading it today and with our previous discussions over the last night, maybe we're upgrading it, but I'm just asking what your comment would be about that.
Thank you, Mayor. So the Bushfire Advisory Committee is actually set under the Bushfires Act. So the Bushfires Act refers to local governments appointing persons to a Bushfire Advisory Committee. So the Bushfires Act refers to a committee, hence why we've got the Bushfire Advisory Committee rather than a working group.
So that would mean under the would it sit under the Bushfires Act or under the Local Government Act? And so therefore with Tranche 2, therefore where would we sit with opening the meeting to the public? Oh, Ms Coles.
Thank you for the question, Mayor. The committee is under the Bushfires Act, but it's established under the Local Government Act 5.8. So under Tranche 2, the committee will have to be open to the public, and it can be closed for confidential items as long as those confidential items meet the requirements of the Act.
So therefore that would have to be another consideration with every report that came from every department with that Local Emergency Management Bushfire Committee.
That is correct, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Wright, you have a question?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for clarifying clause 3.2. Just a supplementary on that clause, and I've had some discussions with some other council members and administration. Is it possible to, or has administration considered that the deputy LEMAC delegate be the deputy presiding member? So if the chairperson is absent, then the deputy can step in, and even considering them to be on a permanent role on that group.
Ms Thrush.
So through you, Mayor, under 3.1, the council's nominated representative or delegate can fill the position of chair. So therefore, that delegate can fill that position.
Councillor Wright.
I suppose just to clarify, I don't believe the deputy actually sits on that committee at the moment unless the chairperson is, or that the primary delegate is there. So what I'm saying is, can you have two council representatives, one being the primary delegate, one being the deputy delegate? So you've got two council members. However, the presiding member would only kick in if the primary delegate is away, if that makes sense.
Ms Thrush.
Through you, Mayor, it could be amended to have the two voting council members on there. However, the voting member does say that it's the council's LEMAC representative or their deputy delegate, so it's one or the other. We could amend that if council wished to have both being voting members.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Sorry, I'm just working through my list of questions that I had, and that was circulated around. Just in regards to the, where's my notes? Just in regards to the provision of the city's standing orders local law, is there a possibility to actually have those in the terms of reference as opposed to the presiding member having to read those out to ensure that it covers all committee meetings?
Through the chair, at this point in time, the directive that we've got from council and corporate support is that will be considered as a whole for an amendment to terms of references across all the committees. So at this stage, this terms of reference stays as it is and it's read out until such a time as all terms of reference for committees are amended.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions on this item? If there are no other questions, we now go to item 4.8. Go back to the start. Item 4.8, CSRFF Forward Planning Grant 2025-26 application for Sports Amenities Building upgrade at Abbeyville Park, Mindari. Ms Davis.
Yes, Mayor.
Do you want to speak to this item at all? Not at all.
No, I guess, thank you, Mayor. We do have the Manager of Community Facilities if any questions are arising from this project.
Any questions, Councillor? Councillor Coetzee.
How long does it take the DLGSC to approve or refuse an application like this one?
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor Coetzee. We generally hear back from the state government around February, March the following year. So we'll hear in February, March 2025 whether we've been successful with this funding application.
Thank you. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. My question, Mr Clem, is on page 246, you've got the outline of the proposed new building. The only question I have, because I have been asked this by other groups that are using our change rooms, is actually about the size of the change room. Now, I notice on this one, change room 1 and change room 2, which are the new ones, you've got them at 27 square metres. Now, does that accommodate, say, the cricket team and their bags and stuff? Because some of the cricket clubs are complaining that some of these change rooms are only just big enough for them to store their bags, and they can't actually go in there with their bags and do that.
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, in this case, this size of change room accommodates cricket and football, cricket and soccer, football, which have less players per team and therefore less space is required. So in the case of cricket, yes, the 27 square metres is sufficient for the 12 players and their cricket bags.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors, on this item? Councillor Miles.
Just the other question, on that particular plan that I was just looking at, I noticed in the female toilets in the multi-purpose building, which is I think the existing building, you got urinals in there.
Mr Clem.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just trying to follow the plan that Councillor Miles might be looking at. Are you, Councillor Miles, if I could just clarify, are you looking at the future multi-purpose building, which would be stage 2?
246. I can't tell you the colour, but it is the future multi-purpose building. That's what it says, yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't believe they're urinals. If I'm looking at it correctly, the female toilets within that multi-purpose building, there are 3 cubicles which look like normal toilet pans to me, but certainly if they're not, we'll get that corrected. Urinals don't belong in female toilets. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Clem. Any other questions on that item? If there are no questions on that item, we go to item 4.10, which is amendment to the City of Wanneroo Cats Local Law 2023. Do we have any questions on the Cats Local Law, councillors? If there are no questions, we now go to item 4.11, which is the Australia Day Awards Working Group and Terms of Reference. Do we have any questions on that? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Just 2 questions. First question is on page 310 of the Terms of Reference. In membership, it references the working group shall consist of the following representation: the mayor or nominee and up to 4 council members. Then the next point, the maximum total on the panel was 4 voting members excluding administration. Just looking at up to 4 council members and the mayor, should that read 5 or is 4 correct?
Mr Stewarts.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the question. Yes, it should read 5. We'll have that amended for next week. Thank you.
Do you have another question, Councillor Smith?
Yes, thank you. Under 6, delegated authority, it says the working group has no delegated power or authority. And then I just refer to the purpose and role. The purpose of the working group is to advise administration on the winners for the annual City of the Wanneroo Australia Day Awards. I'm just wary of the wording of that because it sounds like on the winners sounds like it's a decision-making body. So should it be reworded to say advise administration on the recommended recommendations of award winners? Just for wording purposes. Thanks.
Mr Stewarts.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the question, Councillor Smith. We will just reword that purpose just to clarify, to make sure that's in alignment with the delegated authority for that working group.
Looking at that question, I've got a question here. Should the purpose of a working group be to advise or give recommendations to be presented to council for ratification, because council will be ratifying it with administration just being the process drivers and council being the decision makers? Would that be better, Mr Stewarts?
Yes, Mayor, that's correct. We'll amend that just to clarify that the purpose of the working group is to make a recommendation to council to ratify that decision.
Thank you. Any other questions, Deputy Mayor Rowe?
Thank you, Mayor. The bottom paragraph of the comment section on page 308 refers to the fact that this working group is being established for the upcoming Australia Day Awards, and then subsequently the entire policy and the functions of the working group will be reviewed next year. Does the administration believe that that needs to be in the recommendation, that we authorise that review next year, or is that matter going to be handled operationally, just as a matter of process?
Mr Stewart's.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Deputy Mayor, for your question. The review of the Festival and Cultural Events Committee Terms of Reference is an active piece of work being progressed by that working group. We may just make some amendments to the recommendation just to clarify that. Will be undertaken in 2025.
Thank you, Mr Stewart's. Any other questions? If there are no questions, we now go to corporate strategy and performance. Thank you. Ms Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. We have two items this evening, the warrant of payments and the financial report for the month of, wherever it's gone, July. I have got a couple of comments on that financial activity statement, if I may.
Thank you, Ms Jennings. Thank you. I'd just like to draw to everyone's attention the recommendations that are attached, not only about receiving the financial activity statements for July, but also there's an approval for all the carry forwards from last year, which I'm very pleased to say is here earlier than it normally is, so that's good news. There's also an absolute majority decision, although it has been already, but in this case it's changing the figures in the budget to align to the budget adoption that where there was an amendment to the some of the revenue, so that is included. There's also a contract expense that's increased for East Wanneroo Development Area Cell 9. That hasn't impacted the municipal budget because that comes from the cell dollars. And we also have a number of changes to capital works, which may seem unusual for this time of the year, but the majority of them are relating to grant changes. And there's also one that you may remember we do at this time every year, just sorting last year's capital for information technology, because that's an accounting standard that requires some different treatment. So otherwise I'm happy to take any questions, Mayor. Thank you. Ms Jennings, I've just got a question and a suggestion. Can we please have the note comments on the same page as the graphs? Because I've got note 3, fees and charges down the bottom, and the graph is on 402, and note 4 that's underneath it, that graph is actually on 403, and note 5 that's underneath that graph, their graph is on 404. It would be nice if all of the notes were on the same page as the graphs. It would just help reading the document if we could have that, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I noticed that myself this evening. It already made a note to fix that up, so that will be changed for next week.
Thank you, Ms Jennings. Any other questions on these items? Councillor Wright, on a warrant of payments?
No, the activity statement.
Okay, so we'll go warrant of payments first. Any questions on warrant of payments? There are no questions on warrant of payments. We go to financial activity statement 413. Councillor Wright, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. It was just in regards to a couple of council meetings ago, there was some discussion around including the reserve amounts in that report. Is there any update on the progression of that for this report?
Ms Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. At this point, there's been no change to the reserves from when the budget was adopted. So certainly if there are some changes, we'll have a look at that. Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors, on the financial activity statement? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. On page 416, Ms Jennings, is the investment summary as of July of 24. Just going through the banks that we are using there for our commercial banking on investments. Is administration looking at all about using any of our local branches that might have a community return?
Ms Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. Some of the local banks, well, actually, I noticed the Bank West is now gone from Wanneroo as well, but that wasn't a business bank, so we couldn't use that one. I know we've had a look at some of the others, so I might just take on notice a couple of the others just to let you know where they stand in certainly their rating, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? If there are no more questions, we now go to item to Chief Executive Office, Governance and Legal, item 4.14, extension of review dates of council policies on page 422. Mr CEO.
Thank you, Mayor, for that introduction. There's one item from the CEO's office tonight under Governance and Legal, and certainly happy for Ms Coles to jump in for further comments. I do note that we have received a fair bit of feedback in terms of some of those policy review dates, and I'd just ask Council to perhaps act with a bit of caution next week in terms of perhaps throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because there are some policies there that are quite essential. I mainly refer to the planning one. So if you do have some issues with specific policies, let's treat them individually as opposed to the whole lot. That would be much appreciated. Thanks, councillors. Happy to take any questions, and we can refer them off to the appropriate departments for comment.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Deputy Mayor Rowe, do you have a question?
Just one, Mayor. Trying to get to the broader issue, 11 does seem to be a record from what I can remember of requesting extensions. Is there any concern from the administration about the number of policies that are not being able to be reviewed due to resourcing constraints upon the natural conclusion? Obviously, you've got some that are statutory required, so they're more urgent than others, but 11 is quite significant, and the comments appear to be mainly aligned to the fact that there's not sufficient resourcing to be able to undertake those reviews. Does the administration have some concern about the scale of this problem, because it is seeming to be growing and coming back to us on a fairly regular basis?
Mr CEO.
Thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor. Look, I think 11, there is an element of concern from my perspective, and I think there's an opportunity for us to sit down as an executive leadership team and look at where I guess we can maybe provide some more resourcing to get on top of a couple of these review dates. I also think there's a great opportunity as we go through the new policy framework to also consider how regularly we review policies, because a lot of these policies might be, have a review date that's far too soon. So we might, as part of that framework, look to extend policy review dates if that's appropriate. So I think there's a couple of things we can do. Certainly not ignoring the issue, but I think it's timely that we sat down and had a good look at that to see if we're adequately resourced to keep on top of these issues.
Thank you, Mr Parker. Any other questions on this item? Councillor Herridge.
Thank you, Mayor. I do reiterate what Councillor or Deputy Mayor Rowe was saying. We've actually got five here that I've noticed that we've extended at least once already. I just wanted to check though, being that we've got tree preservation here, is the street tree policy due at the moment as well? And where would that be in its review?
Mr Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's due toward the end of this year, and we are intending to bring it to Council Forum around October, November.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. Just in regards to the 11 policies, does administration have a prioritisation of urgent to non-urgent items, so we actually have a bit of an indication in regards to any of these items that could come before us by the end of the year?
Mr CEO.
I understand it's sort of at the discretion of the individual directors, Councillor Wright, in terms of how they're dealt with.
Any other questions on this item, councillors? Councillor Miles.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I guess just to follow on from the other councillors, Mayor, I mean, obviously some of these policies do seem to come around quite regularly. Is it possible, CEO, to indicate the directorate that's responsible in this report, please? Because closed circuit television, video surveillance, I'm assuming that's community in place. Student citizenship, that might be community in place. Tree preservation, planning. So it'd be nice to know what directorate these fall under at a glance, rather than have to go through our reports.
Mr CEO.
Happy to circulate something to councillors, Councillor Miles, if that would assist.
Any other questions, councillors? If there are no other questions on that item, we now go to item 5, motions on notice, and we have a notice of motion from Councillor Coetzee. Item 6, late reports, we've dealt with both of those. There are no announcements and there are no further late reports. So item 7, public question time, there's no one in the gallery. Item 8, confidential, there is none. Item 9, date of next meeting. The next ordinary council meeting has been scheduled for 6 p.m. on the 10th of September 2024 to be held at Council Chambers, Civic Centre, 23 Dundebar Road, Wanneroo. And item 10, I declare the meeting closed at 7:46 p.m. Thank you, everyone.